Hello everyone, welcome back to the 20th of August midweek market updates on technical insights. This Wednesday morning, Asian market traded largely negative after losses in the US market overnight. Japan Nikkei 225 index is down about 1.7%, with the China CSI300 and the Shanghai Composite down about 0.2%. Hong Kong Hangseng Index also retreated about 0.5%, with the STI slightly up by 0.25%. Overnight in the US, the 30 stocks Dow managed to touch a new all-time high at 45,207 points, but only eked out a 0.02% gains or added 10 points to close at 44,922 points. Broad index S&P 500 dropped 37 points or 0.59% to close at 6,411 points, which is the third negative day in a row for the broad index. Tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite Index was the worst performer among the three US indices, losing 314 points or 1.4% to close at 21,314 points. This is the third negative close in the last four trading sessions. Shares of the Max 7 tech stocks and big chip companies declined, leading the Nasdaq lower. While Nvidia shares lost about 3.5%, AMD and Broadcom slipped 5.4% and 3.6% respectively. Shares of high-flying stock Palantir also dropped by more than 9%, pulling the S&P 500 lower, being the worst performer. Home Depot shares rose 3% after the retail giant maintained the full-year outlook after its second quarter earnings came in slightly below expectations. Investors are now waiting for earnings from Lowe's, Walmart, and Target tonight for insight of how US consumer is coping amid a mixed inflation outlook and the changing US tariff policy. Fed Fund Futures is pricing in an 85% chance that we will see a 25 basis point cut at the US Fed next policy meeting in September. This Friday, the US Fed will also have its annual economic symposium at Jackson Hole, which will be an inflection point because investors believe that Jerome Powell will provide some signals that the rate cuts will be coming in the next September meeting. Failing to do so, market may take another leg lower towards the longer-term moving average for support level. Back to Singapore, our STI index started the week on a slightly negative note. On Monday, we are down about 43 points or 1.02% to close at 4,187 points. On Tuesday, we managed to claw back some of the losses and climb back up above the 4,200 levels, adding 28 points or 0.7% to close at 4,216 points. This Wednesday morning, we saw that the STI is mostly flat, up by just about 10 points or 0.24%, still holding above the 4,200 point level. Week to date, we are still down by about 5 points or 0.1%, following last week's 0.22% loss. Year to date, the STI is still up by more than 11% against the US indices performance of 5 to 9% gain so far this year. Top performer on the STI index on Tuesday was Jardine Matheson Holding, which advanced about 4.2% or US $2.41 to close at US $59.43. The big loser on Tuesday was ST Engineering, which lost 1.8% or 15 cents to finish at $7.99. This was the second consecutive day that the ST Engineering counter emerged as the biggest loser despite announcing a 19.7% rise in first half earnings last week. Another stock on our Singapore market that also saw a massive drop yesterday was iFast. The global digital banking and wealth management platform shares plunged more than 8% as substantial shareholder CP Invest, which is a subsidiary of Temasek-owned Cuscaden Peak Investment, reduced its stakes in the company. The company shares closed lower by 8.5% or down 83 cents to close at $8.94. So for this week's technical analysis, let's take a look at iFast Corporation. This Wednesday morning, iFast Corporation shares continued Tuesday 8.5% decline with another 10-cent drop to $8.84 at the midday break. For the trading week so far, the company shares is down by about 85 cents or 8.7%. Yesterday, 8.5% drop was the biggest single-day drop that we have seen since the April period of this year, with the stock up more than 20% year to date. CP Invest, which is a substantial shareholder of iFast Corporation and a subsidiary of Temasek-owned Cuscaden Peak Investment, reduced its stake in the company by 14.4 million shares worth $131 million at a 6.7% discount to Monday's closing price of $9.77. This meant that CP Invest stake in iFast would shrink from about 9.6% to 4.9% and will cease to be a substantial shareholder of iFast. Looking at iFast chart this year, we noted of the volatile swing in iFast share price this year. In the first quarter, iFast share price rallied to a high of $8.83 on the 27th of February, before the US tariff announcement. In the second quarter, iFast share price plunged all the way down to a year-to-date low of $6.02 on the 7th of April, before rebounding back to the 25th April high of $7.23 over here. Following that, iFast share price consolidated in the third quarter before starting to rally again in the July period to a high of $9.83 that we saw on Monday this week. Looking at key support levels for iFast share price, the share price is now hanging on to the 20 days moving average at $9.02. The next support level will come in at the low bound of the Bollinger Band or the 50 days moving average around the $7.65 or the $7.77 level. Below this level, we see major support at the 200 days moving average, now at $7.33. For key resistance level to watch, the year-to-date high at $9.83 on Monday will be the first resistance to watch for investors, with the upper bound of the Bollinger Band now around the $10.30 level. On the indicator-wise, the MACD has now turned negative this week, and the trajectory of the MACD line seems to be diverging further downwards, signaling that there could be more downside pressure in the near term. On the RSI reading now, the reading is 53 points, down from the 86-point high that we saw last week. If the RSI were to breach below the 50-point neutral mark, we expect further downside to iFast share price. So for investors looking at iFast now, they may use the 50 days moving average at $7.63 or the 200 days moving average at $7.33 as possible entry levels back to the year-to-date high of $9.83. Both DBS and CGS International reiterate their calls to buy and add on the 29th of July, with target price of $10 and $9.20 respectively after iFast's second quarter results. And these are the updates that I have this week. If you find this information useful, do remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest market movement. And I'll see you again next week in the next Technical Insights.